They're the imprimatur. They're the guidelines. What they say goes. And even if you think it's crazy, like that's the standard of care. And if you disagree with it, then, depending on the state or whatnot, you can get in trouble.
Yeah, there's a number of guidelines that I think are absolutely dangerous. I've completely went through the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines for the treatment of adolescent depression, and they distorted the science base for primary care physicians. They cherry-picked research. They left out research that conflicted with the idea that the drugs would be safe and effective. And I'm concerned about how this information gets filtered down to our practicing physicians. How do pediatricians stay on top of science in their field? And do you have like the time to really be on top of this? Because you're generalists, right? And you're kind of gatekeepers in the entire system. It's very hard to be, have specialized skills in one area. How is this information being filtered to pediatricians?
You can't know everything. You have to trust authorities. You just have to. You have to know what the right way is to treat depression, what the right way is to treat ear infections. If the guidelines change, you have to keep up about it. And we have every few years kind of tests we have to do that are based on the updated guidelines. A lot of the questions and the guidelines come from the American Academy of Pediatrics and related groups. And so if their guidelines are poisonous, it's really hard for each individual pediatrician. You don't have all the hours in the day to go through every guideline and see how it's corrupt in this way or that. You have to take it on faith that the guidelines are decent. But because they're poisonous, that means that all of our practice is poisoned. And yeah, it's just really, really hard to know what to do now. We just have to kind of start from scratch practically.
So my follow-up question to that is, how are you approaching it, knowing that those guidelines are somewhat influenced? Are there certain areas where you're focusing more of your attention because it's a bigger problem right now in the practice where you work?
Maybe this is wrong. I assume the guidelines on how to treat ear infections are good. So I'm treating ear infections the same way I have for years. But really, anything where it comes away from health to humanity to social engineering, I'm just now very, very wary of it. And I just kind of try to have more open and honest conversations with the parents and if the children, if they're old enough, about the values involved and things like that. Because I just don't trust the guidelines on those areas anymore.
So how do you approach the mental health crisis that we've been experiencing with teens? I recently spoke to a pediatrician who told me that he was fearful if he acted outside the bounds of those guidelines, that if something would happen, unfortunately, to that teenager, that his license would be at risk. And that was an answer to a question I had regarding the safety of antidepressants, since they more than double the risk of a suicide event for a teenager. Why would we be prescribing them for someone who is presenting as suicidal? So I'm curious to know how you navigate that.
I'm just blessed and lucky. I fear God more than I fear the AAP and the pediatric board. So I just I'm trying not DGAF what they would do to me. I'm not going to poison kids and violate God's law and my conscience. How I approach it, I was thinking of this as I prepared. I wanted, if I can, tell you all a story of a young lady. This was not a patient of mine. But this was a real woman. She was a princess. Her dad was a king of Hungary. The entire country had incredible wealth and power. And his daughter, the princess, could have had a life that would have made, even Meghan Markle jealous, and incredible luxury. And what did she do? She gave it all away. She sold all her jewelry, gave the money to the poor. She built a hospital and didn't just run it like an administrator, but she was in there among the sick and the dying, cleaning their wounds, washing their feet. The children, if they would have to be alone in the hospital at night, she wouldn't allow that. She'd come have them sleep in her bed with her so she could take care of them, take them to the bathroom overnight. She loved them. She poured out love and caring on these people, on these poor, suffering people. And that was Elizabeth of Hungary, Saint Elizabeth, and this was like in the 1200s. And if you asked her, like, on a, the PHQ-9, are you happy? Are you sad? What's your rate, 1 to 5, like your contentment for that? Like, it wouldn't even enter her mind, because that's not how people used to think. And that's certainly not how the saints we used to teach our children about used to think. It's about others. It's about serving and laying your life down for others, because that's what God did for us. And so how do I approach this mental health crisis of today? I think it's pretty inevitable. I mean, we're living in an unprecedented culture, the first one in the history of the world that doesn't have a foundation of sacredness to it. And where instead of having meaning in the world, meaning that comes out from outside of us, that we participate in, we're all told to kind of make our own meaning, invent ourselves, invent purpose. And of course, that's not going to work. It's never worked before. And so people are falling apart. And so I'm just trying to do the best I can. I can't do it for everyone, and it's not really up to me, but of just trying to point families and patients and readers back to the source of truth and goodness and joy. One of the problems we have right now is, and not like to insult you or any, it's just part of the profession. It's like we talk about happiness and happiness. It's not about happiness. Happiness is fleeting, it's superficial. It's about joy. Happiness is to joy. It's like optimism is to hope. I mean, optimism, okay, it's good to see the glass half full, whatever, but that's not going to be worth much. You need hope. That's something which a firm assurance on some solid ground that you can stand on. And you need joy, not happiness. I don't know if Elizabeth of Hungary was happy, but she was filled with joy. And her only regret, towards her dying days was that she said, I wish I could have done more to help other people. That was a princess who tried her best to live like a pauper. And today, instead, we have a bunch of, paupers who just are jealous of these social media princesses and want to live like them. Our whole worldview has been turned on its head. And I'm just trying to point people back to God who turned it the other way again.
I totally agree with you. I do think it's a crisis of meaning and purpose, because life in itself, obviously we're going to face so many trials and tribulations, but what is the means to the end in that? How do we connect that for something that is greater or bigger than ourselves? And the secular nature of our culture and society is certainly contributing to it. We have a crisis of narcissism. What is unprecedented right now is the rise in technology and social media exposure. It's kind of altered the way that we view each other, and the use of social media, especially for young people. And I think that's probably one of the most dangerous predictors of mental health problems is screen time and dedication to social media at a younger age, because it distorts your perception of what is reality. We have young people who are creating these brands for themselves. It's feeding social comparison, narcissism, and this idea that the purpose of living is to somehow fuel your own sense of like attractiveness or receiving attention from others. I've never met anyone who really did experience joy who was completely focused on themselves. It's almost like we are designed to be creators, to be givers, that we are to create what has been provided to us through our own inborn talents and skills, and to create community and assist others. And when our attention is driven outwards, that's when we are the happiest. That's when we are kind of fulfilling that purpose and mission. And then what happens is the culture right now, which is driving isolation and fear and narcissism, you report that to somebody, and now they're saying there's something wrong with you. You're diseased. You have a disorder. And so